Chapter 3 Fragments. Nina. The radiology room was always colder than it needed to be, like the building believed X-rays required suffering for optimal image quality. Nina stood under the harsh fluorescent light, watching Mara adjust the positioning pads with exaggerated care. They moved around the exam table like the air itself might startle their patient. The bald eagle lay under a light cover, sedated, not unconscious, not fully gone, just eased into that thin place between fight and rest where pain didn't have teeth. Oxygen hissed softly. The monitor beeped in a slow, stubborn rhythm that Nina had come to trust the way sailors trusted a lighthouse. Okay, Nina murmured, more to herself than anyone. Let's see what you're hiding. Mara glanced up. You want a lateral first? Lateral, Nina confirmed. Then DV. And if her wing tries to kill us when she wakes up, I'm putting it on my Christmas card list. Mara's mouth twitched. Your Christmas cards have enemies? My Christmas cards have truth, Nina said, stepping to the console. She'd learned early, during residency. During the first year, she ran this place on a budget held together by donations and stubbornness, that you couldn't let the weight of what you were seeing crush you. You had to carry it like a pack. Heavy, yes, but balanced. Humor wasn't denial. It was a handle. Nina watched the image build on the screen in layers of gray and shadow. Bone, clean lines then. Her pulse tightened. The radius and ulna weren't just fractured. They weren't a simple break, the kind you splinted and monitored and prayed over. This was comminuted, shattered into pieces like someone had taken a hammer to it from the inside. Nina leaned closer. And there, faint as glitter, scattered through the soft tissue, were tiny bright specks. Metallic. She stared at the screen until her eyes burned. Mara's voice was careful. That's fragments, Nina finished quietly. Projectile fragments. Not a fall. Not a collision. Not an accident of wildness. A bullet, breaking bone and leaving crumbs behind like a signature. Nina exhaled slowly and felt the anger rise so fast it nearly made her dizzy. She gripped the edge of the counter until she could feel the ridges of it under her gloves. Okay, she said, voice level because the room could feel her, and she refused to let fear become contagious here. Okay, that's evidence. Mara's face had gone pale in the way it always did when cruelty became undeniable. So we're calling him back? Oh, he's getting everything, Nina said, already moving. Full report. Full images. Chain of custody. I'm writing it like it's going to trial, because it is. Mara nodded once, fierce. Good. Nina pulled up the next view and watched the damage confirm itself from another angle. The fracture line angled in a way that made her stomach twist, clean intent. The kind of force designed to drop a bird out of the sky. She thought of the eagle's mate, somewhere out along that river corridor, calling into an empty stretch of air that should have answered. Nina's chest tightened. This is the third one? Mara asked softly. Nina swallowed. If Seth is right. Mara made a sound of disgust. What kind of person? The kind with a reason, Nina said, and hated the steadiness of her own voice. Or the kind who thinks the world is theirs. Mara looked away. Stonewater. Nina didn't answer, because if she spoke that name out loud in this room, she might break something that didn't deserve it. Instead, she reached for the evidence kit, sterile tubes, forceps, bags, labels. She'd handled enough forensic samples to respect the rule that mattered most. If you wanted justice, you had to be boringly perfect. Time, date, patient ID, location of sample, who collected it, where it went, how it was stored. No gaps. No assumptions. Nina snapped a photo of the screen with the hospital camera, then printed copies of the radiographs and slid them into a labeled folder. Mara watched her hands. You're shaking. Nina glanced down and realized she was. She forced her fingers to still with a long inhale through her nose. No, she lied. Mara arched a brow. Nina sighed. Fine. I am. But I'm functional. That's your whole brand, Mara muttered affectionately. Nina's mouth twitched. Exactly. She stepped to the eagle and checked the bird's breathing again, steady, strong. Even drugged, she looked like a creature born to survive. Nina brushed 2 fingers along the edge of the towel near the eagle's neck. Not touching skin. Not giving false comfort. Just being there. "You're not dying on my watch," Nina whispered. "I don't care who thinks they own this county." The eagle's talons flexed once beneath the cover, a faint scrape like a promise. 20 minutes later, the eagle was splinted and settled into a recovery enclosure, dim and quiet, padded, designed to keep her from damaging herself while her body fought its way back. Nina set the enclosure sign with a thick black marker. "Bald eagle, adult, do not disturb, quiet recovery, evidence case." She hesitated, then added underneath, "She bites." Mara leaned in. "That's not medical." "That's community service," Nina said. She stripped her gloves, washed her hands until her knuckles ached, then scrubbed the iodine smear off her arm because Seth had pointed it out like he'd been personally offended by grime. She told herself she was cleaning it because it was sanitary. Not because she could still hear his voice saying, "You should clean that," like he had any business sounding that close, that quietly commanding. She'd spent her life surrounded by men who believed authority was volume. Seth wasn't loud. He was controlled. And that, annoyingly, was harder to ignore. Nina grabbed the file folder and headed to her office, 2 rooms past intake, tucked away where the walls were lined with case binders, grant paperwork, and a corkboard that looked like a conspiracy theory had married a veterinarian's calendar. A wildlife hospital never stopped being a business. It just happened to be a business where your clients tried to stab you and your patients didn't pay. She sat at her desk and opened the report template, fingers moving quickly, efficiently. Patient, bald eagle, adult. Presenting complaint, traumatic wing injury, suspected gunshot. Findings, comminuted fracture of radius/ulna, metallic fragments evident on radiographs, no external wound visible, stable vitals, sedation protocol, splint applied, recommended surgical consult. She wrote it clean. Clinical. Impossible to deny. Then she printed it, signed it, and placed it into an evidence envelope with the radiographs. She looked at Seth's card on her desk, the one she'd bent earlier without meaning to. His name looked too neat on cheap cardstock. Seth Rowland. New district. New problems. Nina picked up her phone. 1 ring. 2. Roland, his voice answered, clipped, then softened a fraction as if he recognized her number. Dr. Hart. Nina hated that her stomach fluttered. She hated it even more that it did it when he said doctor like it meant something. "It's Nina," she said, then immediately thought, great. Casual. Intimate. Why not invite him to brunch while we're at it? She scolded herself. There was a pause on the line 1 beat too long. "Nina," Seth repeated, as if testing the shape of it. "What do you have?" "Radiographs," Nina said, forcing herself back to business. "Comminuted fracture. Metallic fragments in the soft tissue." "This is a gunshot, Seth." His silence wasn't empty. It was heavy. "Where are the fragments now?" he asked. "Documented and secured," Nina replied. "Everything bagged, labeled, signed. You'll get copies of imaging and the medical report today. I can also transfer the original images electronically if your department has a secure portal." "Good," he said, and she heard the anger underneath it again, the leash pulling tight. "That confirms it." Nina pressed her lips together. "Did you find anything at the site?" A pause. Then Seth's voice dropped lower. "Yes." Nina's spine tingled. "Yes, what?" "A blind," he said. "A bait station. A trail cam. A casing. Survey stakes." Nina sat up straighter. "Survey stakes?" "Stonewater Phase 2 boundary marker," he said, and Nina could picture him standing there, staring at it like it was a confession hammered into the ground. Her jaw tightened. "So we're not crazy." "No," Seth replied. "We're not." Nina held the phone tighter. "Are you safe right now?" "I'm fine," he said automatically, too automatic, like he had a script for women asking that question. Nina closed her eyes. "Seth." Silence. Then, honest this time, "I heard someone." I didn't see them. But I wasn't alone out there. Ice slid through Nina's ribs. What do you mean you heard someone? She demanded, suddenly furious. You said you were going to the site to check evidence, not audition for a missing persons report. I had my weapons, Seth said, voice sharpening. Oh good, Nina snapped. That and a badge will definitely stop a bullet. Science. Nina. Don't Nina me, she shot back, then realized she was using his own tone against him and felt both satisfied and mildly ashamed. You need backup. I'm contacting local law enforcement, Seth said. And federal, given the species. But, he paused. Listen to me. I need you to do something. Nina's hands went still. Do not release that eagle without me present, he said, each word deliberate. Do you understand? Nina stared at the wall, at the faded photo of a fawn she'd raised years ago, big eyes, skinny legs, a life that had trusted her. Of course I understand, she said softly. It's not like I'm. Compassion makes people predictable, Seth cut in, like he couldn't help himself. Nina's throat tightened. Yeah, she said quietly. I know. A beat passed, charged and strange. Then she cleared her throat. I wasn't planning on releasing her tomorrow anyway. She's going to need stabilization, imaging follow-ups, surgery consult. We might pin, we might external fixation, depends on how stable she remains. I need her strong before she goes anywhere. Okay, Seth said, and Nina heard relief slip through the cracks of his control. Okay, good. Nina could have ended the call there. But her mouth had opinions. And Seth, she added. Yes. You said there was a trail camera. Yes. I want it, Nina said. A pause. You want it? I want to see what it was pointed at, she said. I want to know if it caught the nest area. I want to know if it caught her, Seth finished, voice rough. Nina swallowed. Yeah. Silence again. Then, you're involved now, Seth said. Nina's laugh came out dry. I've been involved since they put her in my lobby. Don't pretend this is optional. Seth exhaled, controlled, but she heard the frustration. You run a facility. You have staff. You have. I have a job, Nina said, voice gentler. So do you. We can do them together. Or we can do them separately and get outplayed by somebody with money and a bulldozer. Seth didn't answer immediately. When he did, his voice was quieter. I don't like putting civilians in the middle of this. Nina's eyes narrowed. I am literally a doctor. I don't like putting you in the middle of this, he corrected. Nina's breath caught, sharp and involuntary. She stared down at her desk. At the bent card. At her own hands, steady now. Too late, she whispered. Seth went still on the line, like he'd heard it too. Nina, he said, softer, and the way he said her name made her feel like the world shrank to the size of his voice. She forced herself to sound normal. Send someone for the evidence pickup. Or I can meet you at your office, public place. Daylight. Cameras. I'm not handing over federal evidence in a parking lot like we're trading baseball cards. A faint sound on the other end, half laugh, half exhale. The closest he'd come to humor. Fine, Seth said. Public. Daylight. Cameras. Good, Nina replied. And Seth, seriously, get back up. I will, he said. She didn't believe him, but she let it go because she couldn't reach through the phone and physically strap him to a chair. Not that the mental image didn't occur to her. She hung up before her thoughts got any more unprofessional. Nina spent the next 2 hours doing what she always did when the world tried to collapse around her. She worked. She checked the eagle's vitals. Adjusted the splint. Double-checked sedation recovery. Dictated notes. Answered a call about an orphaned opossum that had apparently fallen from the sky, which was a lie but not the wildest one she'd heard this week. She moved through the hospital like a current, steady, necessary. But she couldn't stop thinking about what Seth had said. A blind. Bait. Trail cam. This wasn't some idiot with a rifle and a grudge. This was someone organized. And organized cruelty was always worse. At 3:17 p.m., Jules knocked on her office door and leaned in, cheeks pink from cold air. Dr. Hart? There's someone on the phone for you. Nina looked up. Who? Jules made a face. Stonewater Development. Nina's stomach dropped so fast she half expected it to splatter. Send it to voicemail, Nina said immediately. They said it's urgent, Jules added. And they asked if you were the doctor with the eagle. Nina's skin went cold. How would they know? Nina asked softly. Jules blinked. Know what? That we have a bald eagle, Nina said, voice sharp now. Jules hesitated. Well, it came in through the front. People were here. Someone could've. Nina was already standing. She moved down the hallway toward the lobby like a storm with a stethoscope. Mara looked up from the front desk, one eyebrow lifted. What's wrong? Mara asked. Nina kept her voice low. Who was in the lobby when the eagle came in? The two men, Mara said slowly. Jules. Me. You. Mrs. Blevins dropped off towels. And that guy who always brings us injured turtles like it's his calling. Nina's gaze locked on Mara. And outside. Mara's expression shifted. Oh, the truck. Nina's chest tightened. The dark one. Mara nodded. Yeah, it was across the lot for a minute. I thought it was someone waiting to donate or something. Nina felt her pulse thud in her ears. That wasn't a donor, Nina said. Mara's eyes narrowed. You think they were watching? I think somebody notified Stonewater before I've even sent a report to federal authorities, Nina said, voice tight. Which means either Stonewater has ears everywhere or someone wants me to believe they do. Mara's chin lifted. Do you want me to call them back and tell them to? No, Nina said sharply, then forced herself to breathe. No, don't engage. Not yet. If they're calling to intimidate, they want a reaction. Mara leaned closer. What do we do? Nina stared at the phone on the desk like it might grow teeth. Then she said, we document. She turned to Jules. Print the call log. Times, number, message, everything. Save it. And if they call again, you take their name, their exact wording, and you tell them I'm unavailable. Jules nodded quickly, eyes wide. Mara watched Nina. You're not scared. Nina looked at her. I'm terrified. Mara blinked. Nina swallowed, voice quieter. I'm just practiced at functioning anyway. Mara's face softened. Okay, function. Nina turned back toward her office. On her desk, Seth's bent card waited like a dare. She picked it up again, stared at the number, and made a decision she'd been resisting since he walked through her door. She didn't like being protected. She didn't like being told what to do. She didn't like the way it made her feel both safe and angry. But she liked the eagle alive. She liked the idea of the mate hearing wings in the sky again. And she liked the idea of whoever set up that blind realizing the world contained people who didn't back down. Nina sat, pulled a legal pad closer, and wrote the words that mattered most. Release plan, security first. Then she underlined it hard enough to tear the paper. She would not release that bird alone. She would not leave it to chance. And she would not let a developer with glossy brochures rewrite the rules of nature with a gun. At 6:43 p.m., as the winter light bled out of the windows and the hospital shifted into evening quiet, Nina did one last round. The eagle was still sedated enough to rest. Her breathing was steady. Her eyes opened briefly when Nina approached, sharp, unimpressed, alive, and then closed again as if she'd decided Nina could stay, for now. Nina stood there a moment longer than she needed to. Your mate is still out there, she whispered. And I'm going to get you back to him. But we're doing it smart. The eagle didn't answer. But Nina didn't need her to. She walked back down the hall, dim lights humming overhead, and found Mara waiting at the office doorway with her coat half on. You're going to go with him, aren't you? Mara asked. Nina didn't pretend not to know what she meant. Yes. Mara nodded like it was inevitable. Good. Nina blinked. Good. Because if you don't, Mara said, voice flat, you'll do it anyway. You'll just do it alone, with a granola bar and a hero complex. Nina sighed. That is unfairly accurate. Mara's eyes softened. Just promise me something, boss. Nina's throat tightened. What? Promise me you'll stop trying to carry all of it by yourself, Mara said. Not the hospital. Not the animals. Not this. Nina looked away, because that was the kind of truth that made her chest ache. Then she nodded once. I promise. Mara gave her a small smile, then left. Nina stood alone in the quiet. She opened her phone and called Seth again. He answered on the second ring. Roland. It's Nina, she said. A pause. Then, are you okay? He asked, and the question sounded like it came from somewhere deeper than policy. Nina swallowed. I'm fine. Stonewater called. Silence, sharp. They called you, Seth repeated. They asked if I was the doctor with the eagle, Nina said. Which means they heard. Somehow. His voice became colder. I didn't release anything. I know, Nina said. Neither did I. Seth exhaled slowly. I'm going to make a few calls. Good, Nina replied. Now I'm making one. Seth paused. What do you mean? I mean, Nina said, voice steady, when she's ready to release, I'm going with you. No, Seth said instantly. Nina smiled, because of course he did. That wasn't a request. Nina. Doctor, she corrected sweetly. A pause. Seth's voice was tight. It's dangerous. Yes, Nina agreed. That is literally the point. But she's my patient. I know raptors. I know stress signs. I know when she's about to bolt or crash. You need me. Silence. Then, reluctantly, I don't like it. Nina's smile softened, and she hated the warmth that slipped into her voice. That's fine. I don't like your personality either. A pause, then a low exhale that might have been the ghost of a laugh. Fine, Seth said finally. When the time comes, you ride with me. You follow my instructions. You don't wander. Nina raised her brows even though he couldn't see it. Bossy. Alive, Seth countered. Nina's throat tightened at the word. Alive, she echoed. Get some rest, Seth said. Lock up. Don't leave alone if you can avoid it. I'll have Mara walk me out, Nina lied, because Mara was already gone and Nina didn't want to admit she was alone. Seth didn't answer right away. Then, quietly, Nina. I'm serious. Nina's voice softened despite herself. I know. She hung up and stared at the silent hospital hallway. Somewhere outside, winter pressed its face to the windows. Nina turned off her office light, grabbed her coat, and walked toward the front door. The lobby was dark, the donation jar a faint outline in the gloom. She flipped the lock, pulled the door closed behind her, and stepped into the cold. Her breath steamed in front of her. The gravel lot lay empty, except for a shape at the far edge, half hidden in shadow. A dark older truck. Idling. Waiting. Nina's heart slammed hard enough to hurt. She stood very still, keys clenched between her fingers the way people taught you to do when you didn't want to admit you were scared. The truck didn't move. But Nina felt it, the weight of being watched, the same way prey animals did. A rectangle of light flared briefly inside the cab. A phone screen. As if someone was taking a picture. Nina forced herself to breathe. Then she turned, walked back toward the door without running, and went inside. She locked it again, hard. And in the quiet that followed, Nina finally let herself whisper the truth into the darkness. Okay, she breathed. So that's how it's going to be. She pulled out her phone and texted Seth one line, simple, clinical, impossible to misinterpret. Dark truck outside my facility again. Engine running. I'm inside. She hit send. Then she stood with her back against the locked door, listening to the winter night and the faint hum of an engine that didn't belong there. And somewhere in the building behind her, a bald eagle slept injured, alive, waiting to fly home. Nina closed her eyes and promised the sky she was coming for it.